Hi all. I'm an addict named Trevor, Trevor M. And I was invited here today to talk to you and maybe tell you a little bit about my story and how I came to be here. Because I've been in these rooms quite a long time. My story goes back, I was young when I started. Started about 15 years old. It was fun at first, you know, that weekend type stuff, and the first time I walked into an organized meeting I was 18 years old. Stayed for 3 meetings, stopped using for a couple of days, you know, moved off my drinking binges and moved on to something I thought was a little bit better, and continued the pattern of my behavior until my life really started falling apart. In my 20s. Luckily enough, I got a decent job in a unionized environment, and an EFAP, or at the time substance abuse coordinator, held out his hand and said, "Can I give you a hand up?" Because I was circling the drain. And I was lucky enough to be able to get into an organized treatment center. And there I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself and what I needed to do to make my life better. And I got out of the treatment center and I went, oh, I got this. And very quickly fell on my face because I didn't put the structure in place that I needed to live my life in a better way. I thought if I just took away a substance I would be better, but I'm a grateful recovering addict whose problem is Trevor. Drugs and alcohol just magnified the problems that I was carrying around with me, and it was my painkiller. It was my escape. It was my way to not be the person that I didn't want to be, but it was so artificial and so false, and I needed to find a better way. I was lucky enough, because I'd gone to treatment, and there they taught us the 3 steps. Not a lot of the steps, they introduced us to the steps. We started going to some meetings. Where I went, they said it's like a dance, just 1, 2, 3 step, 1, 2, 3 step, 1, 2, 3 step. That it's not a race, that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, it's a way of life, it's the way we change our perceptions. And I started going to a fellowship, and I heard a really strong message, and it's one that's held me till today. And when I went to the fellowship, they said, see these steps? Learn them, work them, live them, and in that order. And I had to learn the steps first. So I was going to meetings. I went to meetings every day. And in my fellowship, when you go there, all the readings are out on the table, and I would race around and find how it works. Because how it works, well, 1, it was the longest reading in the meeting. And 2, I could read the steps every time, and I learned it. But even just picking up the reading, being able to say, I'm Trevor, I'm an addict, and start reading it, got me actually participating in the meeting. Because nowadays, I work in recovery now, and I'm lucky to be able to live this life and work in recovery. And I have a lot of people say to me, well, meetings don't work. And I generally say, well, I think that you're not really getting involved in the meetings. You're sitting back and just trying to listen, and you really gotta grab this. You really gotta work it. And it's as easy as just picking up one of those readings and introducing yourself and reading off a page, just to get used to participating in the group, so you can actually talk and eventually start opening up. Understand it's a process, right? And we got to practice this process. I mean, and it starts with that first step of going to a meeting, of sitting in a chair, of saying, hey, I need some help, right? So, and it's eventually such a freeing feeling. But in that first bit, you're closed and scared, and that's completely understandable. I mean, up to that point in my life, the people in my life weren't really friends. They were acquaintances. They used me. I used them, right? It was all about what can I get out of this. I was selfish, I was self-centered, I was doing all these things that are just inherently wrong with my life because I was trapped in this prison of use. And the 12 steps is just such an amazing and simple tool to just break the door of that prison. Like, I know it seems hopeless at the time, but I mean, it's really not. I'm sitting here today as a result of those steps. I went through the EAP program, or substance abuse program, where I work, and now I actually run the program. And I'm in touch with a lot of my membership, and send a lot of people sitting in those same stools that you are in right now watching this. It's just, understand that this is going to be a process, and you're going to have to try and have some patience, because patience is one of those things that we just have to get in. If we try and change too much all at once, or try and jump all the way from where we are to where we want to be all in one step, we're not going to make it, because it's a long way to go. Understand that this is just about putting one foot in front of the other, making the next right decision, and moving through this. Okay? So I went into treatment January 3rd. My clean date is May 27th, 2001. Sometimes we don't make it through treatment and then everything's, rainbows and bunny rabbits. I know I had struggles in my early days, and actually when I first took over this position, I started helping people. I was about 2 years into doing this full time, and I was struggling a little bit because I was watching other people struggle, and I went to my predecessor and I said, hey, I'm struggling with their struggles. And he said, Trevor, don't you remember your early recovery? Don't you remember how you struggled? And he brought up the different stories. They're funny stories that I let him tell about my early recovery. But he said, Trevor, you struggled until you did this. Until you put your blinders on and you just concentrated on one foot in front of the other. I wasn't looking around and wondering what they're doing, wondering what she's doing. I just did my thing. And my thing was the 12 steps. I'm part of a fellowship that talks about, in our preamble, we talk about spiritual principles that are indispensable. Honesty, open-mindedness, willingness. That's something that I learned very, very early in my recovery. Not that they're indispensable. It says that in our preamble, it says, with these we are well on our way. I like to say, without these we will fail, because they are the how of recovery. And to grab onto that and to start being honest and start honestly looking at ourselves. And I know that's difficult, because I remember when I looked in the mirror back then, I thought I looked great, and I was way underweight, but my sick mind, when I looked in the mirror, I thought looked great. It was one time in my life I had a six-pack, but I'm not designed to have a six-pack, sorry. The whole thing is to get honest and grab onto that open-mindedness. Addiction is this ongoing cycle of use that it's just so closed. We don't think that we can do anything different, and we're afraid to even try. And we've got to, the best things in life are on the other side of fear, right? And yes, change is uncomfortable and it's painful. But I know the life that I was living before, and I know the pain that I was in at that time, and going through the pain of change to get to where I am now is so worth it. So worth it, because the fact is, and I've said this before to other people, as long as we're breathing, there's hope, right? And all we got to do is grab onto that hope and say, there is something better for me out there. And as alone as you feel in that moment, to actually go to meetings and get in touch and find out there's other people that are already ahead of you on this path. We're all on this same path. Just some of us are here still actively using, and some of us have walked down the path to here where we're in recovery and we're doing all the things we need to do to keep from sliding back to that point. It's a continuum. And to understand that there's people out there that are going to guide you, that are going to help you get you to that point. I mean, it's really, really empowering when knowing that. But the thing is, you don't know that unless you go to meetings, unless you put yourself in those social circles where you're going to meet people who have found a new way of life. I mean, there's a poem in my fellowship called Just for Today. And every time I hear the last verse, I get a chill down my spine. Just for today, I will be unafraid. My thoughts will be on my new associations, people who are not using and have found a new way of life. And as long as I follow this way, I have nothing to fear. Okay? This STEP program is such a simple program, but as addicts, we can make anything difficult. I mean, back then I could screw up grilled cheese. Just like that, right? But I mean, it's written very, very simply, and it's a simple program. And as I said, I started going to meetings and said, what do I do? And they said, keep coming back. I said, I keep coming back, what do I do? They said, sit down, listen, 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? Listen, learn these steps, work these steps. Now, working the steps is a whole other thing. Working the step requires you to first learn the steps. But to work the steps, then you got to get a sponsor. Ooh, that's difficult. You know, you got to put your trust into another addict. You know, you want to talk with them. You get somebody who's going to coach you through these things. But understand, a sponsor is there just to say, hey, watch out for that rock. Watch out for that tree branch as you're walking the path of the steps. Your recovery is your own. Your sponsor is there to help you with that. And you work through the steps. And some people think, oh yeah, step 12, I've made it. I've completed the steps. Then you work through them again. And then you work through them again. And then you work through them again. And eventually they're running in the background. And that's what we call living the program. And the fact is, I can remember when I walked into my first meeting and seeing the slogans on the wall and going, what's that? And then all of a sudden everybody talked at the same time. And I'm like, is this a cult? But it's not. Those are the reason we do that is because those are the things that are really important. Those slogans on the wall. If you work a good recovery program, they will mean something to you. You'll look back on your day. Step 10, right? Continue to take personal inventory. When we're wrong, promptly admit it. When we at the end of the day, when we look at our day and we go, yeah, okay, I applied that slogan there. Oh yeah, that was that step. Oh yeah, I was wrong and I promptly admitted it. I apologized to that person. All those different things. If we're living our program, this type of life comes easy to us, or easier to us. Sorry, I mean it's because it's not easy. Life's not easy. Life is this roller coaster of ups and downs and all these things that we cannot control. And we get so frustrated and so angry at all these things that we can't control. But you know what? My program gives me a way to deal with that. The serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. And there's so many things about this world that we cannot change. Take the current situation. Take COVID-19. I mean, there's a lot of people struggling right now because all the things that they were used to doing around their recovery, well, meetings are closed. I can't go down to the treatment center I used to go to and be an alumni and do those things. This group's closed, right? I mean, it makes it difficult. And I know a lot of people are struggling right now. But funny enough, our program actually has the means to deal with this. Step 1, we admitted we're powerless over our addiction. Our lives have become unmanageable. Step 1 to me truly means acceptance, right? And when we accept the situation in life, when we accept right where we're at, then we can move forward from that. We can make incremental change in our life to where it's better. And accepting my diagnosis, if you want to call it, of addiction or substance use disorder, I mean, we're truly identifying who I am. And that acceptance, I can now apply that to different things in the world. Those things that I cannot control, like COVID-19. And I have to accept that there's been a shift, there's been a change. And I have to be honest about that, and I have to be open-minded. Okay, so this has changed. Now what can I do about it? I can say, well, that's a problem, or that's a problem, or that's a problem. But I don't like dealing with the problems. I like dealing with the solution, right? These three fingers that are pointing at me are the solution, okay? There's the problem we identified, now let's deal with the solution. What am I going to do about it? How am I going to work recovery into my life? Just so happens as an auto worker and a shift worker, I've run into this type of problem. Because when I was going to shift work and I'd switch, I had to find a way to get my meetings. I had to find a way to work recovery into my day, right? And so when you took away my meetings, I had to replace it. What did I replace it with? Readings, listening to speakers on tape, phone calls to other addicts, journaling, putting recovery into my life, even though I couldn't get to a meeting. And that applies to the situation we're right in. How do I remain open-minded enough to grab onto that and the willingness to do whatever it takes? My sponsor told me that one time, and it really stuck with me all these years. Trevor, if you just put as much effort into your recovery as you did into using, everything will be fine. The way he said it was actually, did anybody ever offer you a joint or a line and you said, no thanks, I had one yesterday? Right? So get to that meeting today. If you can't physically get to a meeting, get to one online. If you can't get to one online, what can you do? I know for me, everybody carries one of these nowadays, and I have it set up offline. All my recovery stuff's in there. Anything I need, I can run a meeting off of my phone without having the internet, even if I have to run the meeting with myself. Or as I'm fond of saying, the three of us, me, myself, and I, right? I can have a meeting, and I can work through that. I mean, the fact is that I think about where I was comparative to where I am now, and it's a lifetime of difference. It's happened slowly over a period of time by making that next right decision and continuing to live my program. That's it. It's as simple as that. There's been a lot of things that have tried to derail me in this. I mean, I've had a lot of things in my life happen during this time period that I have seen other people allow themselves get derailed by. I was told early in my recovery by a very good friend of mine, somebody who I consider one of the sponsors in my life, that you have to say you're done. Make that commitment to yourself, I'm done. And I made that commitment to myself. My clean date's May 27th, and I made that commitment to myself. It was May 26th, about 8:30 in the evening, when I was in a jail cell. And I told myself, never again. Never again will I be here. Never again will I put myself in a situation where I'm not in control anymore. Because I accept that I'm powerless. But right now, I have power. I have the power of choice. I have the choice not to pick up the first one. If I ever pick up the first one, that power's gone again, and I will be completely powerless. But right now I have some power, and I use it. I use it to just drive this life of mine that's full of recovery, full of people I love, full of support, and allows me to help other addicts. Step 12. I have had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. And I do strive to pass the message to the addict who still suffers. And I always practice these principles in all of my affairs. I live my step program because I need to. And I gotta tell you, for me that's just the base, because there's a whole lot more going on in the problems that are Trevor than just what the steps can hold. But for me to even get to that stuff, to the anger, to that repressed hurt, to anything, childhood like, anything like that, the very first thing I needed to do was get rid of the drugs and the alcohol and keep that so I could stabilize, and then I could start addressing the other things. People who knew me back then say to me, "Who are you and what'd you do with Trevor?" Because I'm no longer that person. I am a completely different person who is filled with love, not animosity, not like I used to be. So understand that this is a process. There is hope. There's people in the center that you're in now. There's people who are outside at any of the fellowship groups, as a friend of mine and I call them the alphabet groups, right? It's just a whole bunch of us trying to help each other deal with the demons that are inside us that we carry. So understand that you're not alone. And I mean, just reach out. Don't isolate. Live those steps. And if you do that, things are going to get better. Not in your time. we have to practice a little bit of patience. And understand that this is a practice. And they talk about mindfulness practice or yoga practice. I mean, even the sports teams, they practice all the time. That's why they're so good at it. Understand that this is something you got to practice. It's not something you learn once, hey, I got that and I'm good to go. No. And yes, it's difficult. But as I like to tell people, if you can remember back to when you were very young and you first started tying your shoes, at that time that was the most difficult thing that you had ever done, and you struggled with it, and nowadays you just do it without thinking about it. You can have 10 things on your mind, chewing gum, drinking coffee, whatever you're doing, you still tie your shoes without thinking about it. And understand that if you put the work in around your recovery program, it'll be running in the background just like that. So keep with it, and you're not alone.